I'm gonna be honest with you, sometimes it is difficult to truly appreciate the differences in two devices until you are the one holding them. And that's the case with these two drones. I have owned the Mini 2 for the better part of 2 years, and I have finally gotten to get my hands on a Mavic 2 Pro. You may remember a while back, I crashed my original Mini 2, and in the process of grieving and trying to figure out what I was going to do to cover the regatta that was coming up, I went through a bunch of different options in the span of just a few hours. Do I stick with the Mini 2, good old reliable, who has gotten me some beautiful shots? Do I upgrade to something like the Mavic 2 Pro, the Mavic Air 2S? Do I just scratch it all together? Because let's face it, when you crash a drone, you kind of feel like you're not meant to do this. But ultimately, I stayed with the Mini 2, and I still stand by that decision. I still think that the Mini 2 is the best consumer drone out on the market at this time, especially when you take the price into consideration. But I'm still curious. I still wanted to test out the Mavic 2 Pro to see what is it like? How does it differ from the Phantom 4 Pro that I flew? How is it different from my Mini 2? And I still wanted to see if there was some way for me to get my hands on one so that I could make my own decisions, make my own comparisons, and see what it was like to fly this drone. So let's go ahead and compare and contrast these two drones. And right out of the box, the first comparison, it's a little unfair to be honest, but it is the size and the weight. The Mini 2 comes in at 249 grams. And that's important because if you are a recreational pilot, you technically don't have to register this. You don't need a 107 to just go out and fly this and have fun. I highly recommend that you do, whereas the Mavic 2 Pro comes in at a whopping 907 grams. That's just around 2 pounds. That's 3.6 times the weight of the Mini 2. And that means you do need to register your Mavic 2 Pro. You probably should have your Part 107 license to fly this, just because with it being so much more weight, so much more powerful, you can do a lot more damage with this than you can with this. And sticking with another physical attribute of these two drones is the props. You may remember back months ago, almost a year ago actually, I almost lost the Mini 2 the first time when I threw a prop. I had the screws on the top here, one of them backed out and one of my props went flying off of even one of the motors. So I was flying with, instead of 8 props, I was flying with 7, and I noticed a performance lag. And so if you look at the Mini 2, you notice that it takes a Phillips head screwdriver. The Mavic 2 Pro has a locking system where both propellers come off of the motor at one time. And what you do is you make sure that you have the gray with the gray, and then there's no gray for a black on black, and you line them up with the motor that they go with. And rather than screw these on, you line up the little point, and then you just push and twist, and now that prop won't come off. And you got to remember that the gray ones spin a certain way to lock and the black ones spin a different way to lock, because your motors are spinning 2 different ways to keep you nice and stable and up in the air. My number 3 big difference between these two drones actually is not the drone itself, that is the controller. And believe me, I find it very funny that the smaller drone has the bigger controller, at least until this one unfolds. So I've gotten used to the fact that the Mini 2 has this massive controller. You put the sticks in the bottom, then you screw them in. You take this part out, which is actually your antennas, and you extend that and you put your phone up top, you connect it with a wire, and you're good to go. As a 6'6" individual with some pretty big hands, I like a bigger controller to hold on to, and it just gives me a little bit more sense of security. So when I picked up the Mavic 2 Pro, I noticed how small this was, and I immediately thought this might not end well. But when it unfolds and you get everything set out and you include the phone in between, it's honestly not that big of a difference. And difference number 4 is along those same lines. Along with the controller is the interface that you use. And the Mini 2 uses the DJI Fly app, the newer of the apps. Whereas the Mavic 2 Pro, which was released in 2018, uses the DJI Go 4 app. In bare bones, these two apps are basically the same. You control the shutter speed, you control the ISO, you control a lot of different things. It gives you telemetry to let you know where your drone is, what your drone's doing. You can use Google Maps to map out where you're going. You can do all the different quick shots and things like that. It's just, it takes a little getting used to realize that your one status bar is at the top versus to the right. It's just a little confusing, and it just takes practice. And my 5th and final point is kind of noticeable on the outside, but it's really the inner workings of this particular part that the difference is noticeable, and that is in the cameras. You can see how much smaller that Mini 2 camera is versus the Mavic 2 Pro, which is upside down, versus the Mavic 2 Pro's camera. And that's because the Mavic 2 Pro has a 1-inch sensor. And when it came out in 2018, it was the first consumer grade professional drone where you could control the aperture and it had a 1-inch sensor. Since then, some other drones have introduced that, and it just gives you a lot more ability, a lot better low light sensitivity to get beautiful images. And oh yeah, that allows you to shoot in DJI's log format, D-Log, whereas the Mini 2 doesn't have that flatter profile. If you're not overly familiar with video, log is like shooting photos in RAW. It's a flatter profile that has a lot more information locked into it to where you can adjust a lot more to it. You can bring down the highlights, increase the shadows. You can do a lot more. You can color grade it to your heart's content. So what are my initial thoughts and my comparisons between the Mini 2 and the Mavic 2 Pro? Well, first off, this is such a small drone, and I stand by what I said earlier in this video, what I said in videos past. This is probably the best consumer drone out there for the average Joe. You just get so much that the average person can use really quickly, can learn how to use really quickly, and can get beautiful footage that looks like it came from a cinema drone. A lot of these drones have come down in price. This is currently anywhere between used at about $1,000 all the way up to roughly $2,500, I think I've seen for still new ones that people are trying to unload. And so it's a bit of a higher price point, but you get a lot with it. It is a pro level drone. You have a better camera. You have some more features that are unlocked using this drone. So it really just depends on what you're looking to do. You can probably fly this a little more under the radar, so to speak, no pun intended, than you can with this. And while I haven't gotten to fly the Mavic 2 Pro nearly as much as I have the Mini 2, I am starting to really enjoy this. I just feel like the more that I practice, the more that you do anything, whether it be drive a car, write, photograph, do video, the more you practice something, the better you get. And that's all it's gonna take. It's just gonna take me getting this up in the air, trying different things, learning the different settings, and just getting more comfortable with a drone of this size. So there you have it, a quick and easy comparison between the Mini 2 and the Mavic 2 Pro. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you're enjoying all of the content that I'm putting out in this month of August. Again, I'm putting out a short on Monday, a short on Friday, my longer form on Wednesday. If there's something that you would like to see in particular, please drop a comment down below. As always, like this video. I greatly appreciate it. Please subscribe if you don't already, and I will catch you in another video down the road.